Good afternoon, everybody. I should say good morning to some of our colleagues on the West Coast. My name is Brandon Busteed. I serve as the Chief Partnership Officer and Global Head of Learn Work Innovation at Kaplan. I'm delighted to be the moderator for today's discussion around expanding access for student success. We're going to be talking about a focus on career outcomes and academic equity today. And we have a terrific group of panelists to be part of this conversation. From a very diverse set of institutions and from different roles, administrative roles within those institutions. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Tony Allen, the president of Delaware State University, which is now officially the fastest growing HBCU in the country. Congratulations, Tony, on that work. We have Dr. Eric Dieter, who's the executive director of the Longhorn Center for Academic Equity at UT Austin. And we have Brittany Wampler, who is the Director of Career Development and Exploration at Cleveland State University. And I'm also joined by my great colleague, Kim Canning, our Vice President of University Partnerships at Kaplan. And with that, I would love to welcome to the video screen our panelists today. So look, I'm just going to start off with a quick, easy question, gang, and that is to just tell us a little bit more about your institutions, right? Very different institutions in different parts of the country. Each of you are in different roles, and would love to just hear a little bit more about your institutions and some of the highlights. What's got you most excited about what's happening at Delaware State and UT Austin and Cleveland State? Tony, do you want to kick us off, sir?
Sure, Brandon, it's great to be here and great to be here with my colleagues as well. I am the proud president of Delaware State. Thank you for the plug as the fastest growing HBCU. We're a 132-year-old institution. And what I'm most proud about is our vision. We seek to be the most uniquely diverse, contemporary, and unapologetic HBCU in the country. And as we note those things, is really about access for all of us. Our portfolio is significant, but without our making sure that we can provide access to anyone who believes that they should have an opportunity at higher education, we're just not doing our job. So we're excited about that. You'll note that we're also the #1 choice for students of color in Delaware to attend Delaware State University, and that's just happened over the past year as well. And we're building capacity to create professionals of color, not only in Delaware, but across the country. Fun fact, we have an aviation program that really grew out of the Tuskegee Airmen that has been up and running now since 1986. We actually produce more pilots of color than any other place in the country. So our ability to make sure that we're providing quality education for all in a thoughtful way, in a meaningful way, is important, we believe, not only to the state of Delaware, but across the country. And I believe that's a proxy, just one proxy for the incredible HBCUs across this nation.
Well, I always learn something new, and that was a new one about the pilot production from Delaware State. So thanks for joining us. Dr. Dieter, thanks for joining us from Austin. Tell us a little bit more about UT and the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's hot here, so that's one thing everybody should know, super hot. But despite that, everybody's doing the best they can to support students. So as everybody probably knows, UT Austin is one of the largest undergraduate and graduate institutions in the country. We're a Research One institution. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 undergraduates and maybe pushing 20,000 graduate students on campus. Where I'm located on campus is part of the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement, or DDCE, which is really designed to help all kinds of students across campus in all sorts of ways. Our center, the Longhorn Center for Academic Equity, is a student-centric center that was really designed to kind of do 3 big pools of support: academic support, professional support, and personal support. And there are a variety of programs that kind of check all of those different boxes and all those different pools. I direct our college to career initiatives, so a portfolio of programs that are really helping students thinking about, once they transition out of college, what's going to come next for them, and how do they learn about it early enough to make informed decisions about whether or not it's a good decision for them. And then once they've kind of lighted on a decision, how do they have good, effective, efficient, concrete plans in place to get them where they need to go. College is weird because students come out of high school and it's kind of the biggest transition of their life after this long period of time. And then it's about 4, maybe 5 years, pretty short period of time in which they have, in some ways, an even more significant transition. So UT Austin, and I think kind of higher education in general, I'm sure we'll talk about this, is thinking more explicitly and emphatically about that transition from undergraduate to whatever comes next. For a lot of students, that's postgraduate education, right? Especially given the changing workforce environment, given the value, how all these different degrees are valued, and the different things you can do with them, or the things that you're limited from doing if you don't have them. So a lot of what we're doing at UT Austin is really trying to think about how do we get students prepared for what comes next so that they go in eyes wide open, and they're kind of ready to hit the ground running where law school, med school, graduate programs, PhDs, whatever it is that they want. So I'm thrilled to be here and I look forward to the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And we're going to now swing around the country a little further north to Cleveland, to Brittany. Tell us a bit more about Cleveland State and what you're up to.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Wampler, and I do just want to share some gratitude for inviting us. I feel very grateful for being on the panel today with Tony and Eric and focusing on equity and education. That is the focus of CSU. That is the focus of our institution. So let me paint a picture of Cleveland State University and our urban public institution in the heart of Cleveland. We have about 14,000 students right now. We are focused on social mobility. And for us, that is our number one goal, number one mission. The way in which we take that work seriously is in serving every pocket of student that comes to CSU. We are grateful for about 1/3 of our students that come in as first-generation college students. Another third of our student body encompasses underrepresented minority students, most who went through the education system here in Cleveland, Ohio. And then we serve a growing number of international students, a growing number of graduate students, and how we take our mission and vision is trying to help in the development of career dreams. And so my office supports all students tracking toward career, very similar to the work that Eric is doing. And what we are really focused on right now is how are we launching careers and allowing students to feel that return on investment for their degree once they walk across the stage at graduation. So I know we'll get into the meat of the conversation and talk about the ways in which each of our institutions are addressing equity in education, but this is a real passion point for me. And my own career mission is breaking down the barriers that students experience. And I'm really excited to hear about the ways in which each of our institutions are addressing those barriers.
It's awesome. And Kim, as our final panelist, would love to hear more about Kaplan and what you and your team are up to.
Yeah, so I have been at Kaplan. I just had my 25-year work anniversary a couple weeks ago. And in thinking about that, my favorite time, obviously had a lot of different roles and responsibilities. My favorite time at Kaplan really has been the last 10 years. I've had the privilege of working on a team that partners with colleges and universities at an institutional level across the country. And really our main goal, our big focus, is how can we expand on Stanley Kaplan's original mission in terms of access and equity. And really, how do we take the broad set of resources that Kaplan has and working with a partner, figure out how to turn those into a solution that eliminates obstacles for students, right? And so hopefully we'll be able to spend a little bit of time talking about our All Access program that launched about 1.5 years ago. But we're really seeing the needle move in terms of access when it comes to what All Access, our program, can provide students in terms of standardized test prep, professional licensing, credentials, workforce readiness. And as Brittany mentioned, how those pieces of the puzzle can really propel a student to their, further down their journey, further down their path. And so, I'm really thrilled to be part of this conversation, especially with these panelists. I think every time we have one of these discussions, I learned so much about the innovative work that you all are doing, but then I also walk away in awe of the innovative work that you're doing. So thank you all for being here.
Awesome. Well, now that I've given everybody a little time to warm up, I'm going to start hitting with the real rough questions here. It was actually a bit of a segue, Kim, from what you were talking about. Career readiness is indeed a big topic. It has been a growing conversation across higher ed, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. And yet it's also right now one of the greatest critiques of U.S. higher education, right? About 13% of the U.S. general population strongly agrees that college graduates are well prepared for success in the workplace. That is not exactly a vote of confidence, right? When you survey C-level business executives, it's only 11%. I thought this was rather ironic, but trustees of colleges and universities are actually the most skeptical on this point. They're at about 6%, strongly agreeing to a similar statement. And of course, it goes hand in hand with the number one reason why Americans value higher education, which is to get a good or better job. It's not the only reason we value higher ed, but obviously a really important one. And as college costs go up and the belief in the ROI around the career readiness is in question, it's a major issue for institutions. At the same time, we know we have all been struggling mightily, despite many great efforts, to improve access and equity in U.S. higher education. Look at the last 50 years, and we've barely moved the needle on the percentage of students born into the bottom quartile socioeconomic status in terms of their likelihood of completing a bachelor's degree. So we all still have a lot of work to do. My question is, across your institutions, which have been very, very focused on access and equity, what are you doing to infuse career readiness into the student experience? I'm sure there's a number of examples, but I would love to hear about some of the primary ones that you're working on. So Tony, if you want to lead us off, that would be terrific.
Sure, Brandon, and it's an important question. I can tell you at Delaware State, we're doing a couple of things. First, deepening the talent pipeline. It's very important that you start early, particularly for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So at Delaware State, we actually have an early college school. It's a school we chartered about 9 years ago. Starts in the 7th grade, and they stay with us through the 12th grade. And when they're in high school, they can earn up to 60 college credits before they're ever admitted into any university. About 53% of those students actually come to Delaware State, and we're proud to say that next year will be the first time we're offering associate degrees to those high school graduates. It's a really, really important pipeline for us. One, because those students, 98%, are aspiring first-generation college students. So to have them get those credits, which usually makes them a second semester sophomore, sometimes a first semester junior, cuts the cost because they've acquired those credits from us in high school, tuition free, builds capacity for them at Delaware State to graduate early. Matter of fact, any graduating high school senior in Delaware who has a 2.75 or higher will get a full 4-year tuition-free scholarship to Delaware State. So imagine a high schooler who's already got 60 college credits could effectively finish their college degree, an undergraduate degree, in 2 years and get their master's degree in 4 years, all at no cost to them or their family. With respect to career readiness, I think that's an important piece for us too. I tell companies a lot, it is not acceptable at a place like Delaware State for you to come see our students in their rising junior and rising senior year. In the same way that many of my students are first generation college students, they're also first generation corporate, which means they were not sitting at the tables of their families talking about what happened at the Fortune 50 companies that their mother and father worked at. So it really gives us an opportunity to engage them early in our program before they're ever in an internship or placement, so they can ask the questions that they otherwise might not think are acceptable or would be otherwise too afraid to ask, but be very helpful in their careers.
I'm so glad you started talking about talent pipeline, Tony. I mean, that's an issue that colleges are thinking about, employers are thinking about, and the honest answer is, we need to be thinking years, and in some cases, a decade or more out. And especially as students think about career opportunities, I was involved with studies where, the expression, if you can't see it, you can't be it, was very real by middle school. In other words, if a student didn't see themselves in a job in banking or in software development or whatever it might be, that's the beginning of their off-ramp from even thinking about going down that path. So I'm just thrilled to hear an example of a university that's reaching out into the K-12 space in a very, very concerted way. Eric, what are some of the examples at UT?
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff. I mean, I definitely agree that the pre-college reach back is really important. I don't think any institution of higher education cannot be doing work with its partners in K through 12 and considering themselves kind of seriously involved in this educational conversation in the United States. So, for instance, we have a Longhorn Center for School Partnerships, and they run outreach centers in most of the metropolitan areas in Texas, as well as lots of other programs, some of which go all the way down to elementary school. And part of that is just getting students acclimatized to college attendance, to hearing things about what it means to go to college, the process of navigating college, and then what comes after college, right? So I think that leads us to other questions about bringing in and supporting as many first-gen students as possible. At UT Austin, that is currently around 25% of the undergraduate population qualifies first generation. And then thinking about Pell eligibility as well, and the different kinds of supports that students who are Pell eligible might need relative to students who are not Pell eligible. I think building multi-institutional partnerships is really important. So a lot of the programming that we do, because UT Austin is a PWI, even though we are recently also become a Hispanic serving institution and an Asian American and Pacific Islander serving institution, we are still primarily a PWI. So reaching out to programs around us, institutions around us, like Houston-Tillotson, which is the local HBCU in Austin here, Austin Community College, right, which is the large community, making sure we're building good partnerships with them so that when students are transferring from school to school, or even if there's something that's happening on one campus, that we can open up access to students at other campuses. That's really important. I think providing a variety of supports is really important. So thinking about career counseling and career engagement, all of which is at UT woven kind of everywhere. So all the colleges and schools have kind of their in-house career development offices, but then we also, as a campus, have what's called the Texas Career Engagement Center, which is helping all students, right, undergraduates, graduates, and recent graduates as well. So there's a continuity of support, but beyond the career engagement, right, all the academic supports we need, the writing centers need to be part of these conversations, the learning centers need to be part of these conversations, as do any mental health or counseling centers. They need to be absolutely part of these conversations. So the academic success comes from success in those other areas, or where there's just kind of less turmoil in those other areas. And then I think ultimately anything we can do, and this is a lot of what our programming does, my college to career programming does, is match and fit. Right. So when we talk to students about going into a law school or a med school or PhD, we're really good about using this language of good fit. Right. And you need to set up a criteria by which you can evaluate whether or not a program is a good fit for you. Some of that's academic, but some of that might be demographic. Some of that might be geographic. Some of that is financial. Whatever that criteria is, we are really good at training students to do that. I'm not sure that we're as good at training students to think about their careers in the same way as they would pick a law school, a med school, or a PhD program, right? They're who's going to pay you the most right out of the gate seems to be the number one criteria, which is not unimportant, but I don't know if it's the only criteria if a student is going to be miserable, right? And our job should be the reduction of misery, right? This is hard enough. This is a hard enough transitioning from college into the rest of your life, the next 50 to 60 years, without having this added misery of getting a job just because you got the biggest paycheck, right? And there was no other criteria that you were really trained or encouraged to think about when you try to pick a job. So I think that's a large part of it, is match and fit for careers the same way that you would pick a postgraduate school. Part of that is demystification of the whole process, right? Lots of people do it. Lots of people could do it that don't, for a variety of reasons, but we don't want fear and anxiety to be the reason that you don't do it. And then I think maybe the other thing, and I'll pass the baton here, is the students probably need to be taught better how to talk about their intellectual habits and how they translate, right? So students who walk out of college have all kinds of skills, and part of the job here is for their employers to understand how those things translate, because most of them have gone through college, so they need to do a better job of understanding, right? But also, I think students can do a better job of talking about, right, how their skills translate. So there's a lot of perception that students in certain disciplines, usually humanities, are not going to be as competitive on the job market. the numbers don't really bear that out, right? Humanities students do quite well. And part of that is because, I think they can talk about certain skills or habits of mind that they have, like comfort with ambiguity, right? Learning how to learn, figuring out how to isolate a problem, and then coming up with steps to do a solution. There are things that you get taught when you are reading novels that translate to doing work for a tech company or for a financial firm, right? And it's just sometimes it's less obvious than I learned how to do mass spectrometry, and now that's what I'm going to do as a profession. So I think getting them to really understand what it is that they're learning, and that constantly they're doing things that are applicable skills, but sometimes they need to extrapolate and highlight it, put a spotlight on it.
There's a lot of good stuff in there, but I'm fixated on the reduction of misery as a goal, Eric.
Yeah.
And what you made me think of is a couple of different points. We measure unemployment in the U.S. We don't measure the percentage of people who have great jobs. And it's definitely something you can do, right? And if you were starting to do that, you would have more people aiming to create jobs and then, shift jobs and change the nature of those jobs to optimize those that are really good. We talk a lot about the fact right now we have 1.7 jobs open for every person looking for work in the United States. Some of that is a skills gap. There's a job, I don't have the training or qualification to do it. Another of it is what I call a demand gap. That's a job, but I don't want that job. So I actually think there's a lot of thoughtful analysis and changes in practice that we could do around that reduction of misery comment. So thank you for that. Brittany, in your title is career exploration, which I really like. Tell us how you're helping students do that.
Yeah, and I think I'll take this in a couple of different ways. And I really appreciate, Tony and Eric, your comments around fit, and then also around how we're building out the talent pipeline. I want to focus a little bit more on building experiences, because I think that's one angle of this work readiness piece that we're not necessarily addressing, at least at this point. Work readiness is partnership with industry. And I think, so Cleveland State, as a rule, or as by function of our mission, we drive the economy in Northeast Ohio. 80% or more of our graduates stay local after graduation, meaning that they are developing the economy, they're feeding the economy by going to school at Cleveland State. And so the way in which we have been very strategic around that is building better partnerships within the community with employers. So we've put a lot of effort over the past couple of years into building out the employer network, which is building out the opportunities for students to engage in internships. We're hoping to have more direct partnerships and more awareness around some of the barriers our students face when it comes to landing an internship. Probably 80 to 90% of our students are working while they're going to school, and not just working because they want money for the weekend, but working because they are supporting families or supporting their family, paying part of their family's rent, living at home, supporting the food or bills that need to be paid, having families of their own, whatever the case may be. And so for our students, there is a need to educate them around finding an internship that will offer transferable skills and help them land that job after graduation. But in order to do that, we have to support paid internships. We have to support hiring international students for CPT and internships locally. And so we're trying to really strategically build those partnerships. And then here on campus, and what we're doing with our students to elevate those experiences, we hear about the sophomore slump. I want to change the language around that to be a sophomore start. You can go through your freshman year and work in the summer at a landscaping job, in the service industry, bartending, whatever it is that you want to do. But at sophomore year, you start launching your career. And our goal is really elevating the experience of our sophomore students. So by the end of that year, they're landing their first transferable work experience for summer in between sophomore and junior year, and then again between junior and senior year. We both know, and we all probably know, that internships will yield more job offers. Internships will yield those work readiness, career competencies, and internships, when and particularly when they are offered paid, will give students a better, well-rounded college experience. And if a student can't be paid for their time, at CSU, the likelihood that they're going to quit another job that they are being paid to do in order to seek out that experience is very low. So we have come up with some ways in which to help fund internships alongside our local Chamber of Commerce, Greater Cleveland Partnership, alongside a third-party nonprofit organization, Elevate to Even Plus, to help companies pay their interns a wage that will be competitive with what they're making outside of that. The other thing we're focusing energy on in terms of building career development into the student experience this upcoming year is investing in it by paying students for their time for our programming. So we are investing $100,000 toward incentivizing and paying students for their time to attend workshops, career fairs, events, programming, and other opportunities. And so at certain points, they will be able to get gift cards or to get cash to spend on campus as soon as they reach a certain amount by attending freshman pre-professional orientation or coming in to get their headshot or other workshops and programs that we know will help them develop. So it's the idea that, you know, we value your time so much that we're going to pay you for it, and you're going to develop skills on the other side of it too.
Yeah, look, back in my day, it was just free pizza. Now it's cold hard cash. I mean, I'm thinking, you know,
Pizza doesn't get people there anymore, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, clearly not. So, you know, I'm thrilled to hear some of these creative ideas and, you know, internships, as you know, Brittany, is one of my favorite hot button subjects. And I did a LinkedIn post just a couple of weeks ago about a recent study that just freshly hit the airwaves on the percentage of students in the last year who reported having an internship. And this is a study that was looking longitudinally pre-pandemic and was able to look at post-pandemic effects. And, you know, my post was basically, you know, if there was anything we needed to bounce back most after the pandemic for students and work readiness, it was internships. And unfortunately, we have fewer students doing internships than we did pre-pandemic. So we are going in the wrong direction. And it's all the things that you've mentioned, Brittany, right? It's how do you get more employers to step up? Because the last I checked, college and universities don't have internships. You could put work study in that category, but we need employers to play a major role here. And then we have this whole issue of unpaid internships. I mean, it was only this past year that our own United States White House started to pay its interns. So this isn't just companies that aren't stepping up to the table, right? It's nonprofits, state, federal government entities. We have to keep pushing this. This is not higher ed's issue to solve alone. We need employers of all shapes and sizes to come to the table. So anyway, I love the points you guys have covered. Kim, you got anything to add from your perspective looking across the country?
I just think it's interesting when Brittany's talking about paying students for their time. I think that's a real acknowledgement that, you know, students are coming to school, to university with so many more challenges than before, right? So juggling families, supporting their families, multiple jobs, all those things. I think that's just, and I think there were examples that Tony and Eric gave too, but I think just that's like a real acknowledgement. And I think, you know, those kinds of initiatives, that really speaks to a school, department, you know, understanding a student's perspective. And I think that kind of buy-in then continues to grow the trust, right? Grow just where you can continue to support those students. So I think that's really powerful.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the work that we're all doing together, essentially, with what Kim referenced in All Access. Each of your institutions have become partners with Kaplan in this process. And, you know, Kim, I might ask you to just describe it a little bit more specifically in terms of what it is we're actually doing. And then I would love to hear each of you talk about why you did this. Why was this important to your institution? You know, how does it fit into the context of some of the other things you mentioned? But before I do that, you know, Tony, yes, sir.
But before we go on to that important topic, I just want to raise something we have not started yet, but we'll be instituting. We're working with a company called Braven to develop a mandatory class taught by practitioners that will be for the sophomore year experience. So we've gotten it through the travails of the faculty senate. So we will get it done. But the idea is that those practitioners only focus on career readiness in that mandatory class, and they stay with those students throughout the rest of their time at the university. It's a model that's been around for 10 years. That Braven works specifically with HSIs, HBCUs, and MSIs, and their track record is strong, particularly as it relates to internships, which, as Brittany noted, are key to long-term prospects, and that what I would say are the softer skills as to how you navigate in respective industries. So I just want to add that it was not easy to do, making it mandatory. There were some concerns with respect to our own faculty about what it meant, but we will start it in January 24, and we have high hopes for its ongoing success.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I've been familiar with Braven's work, and you're right, it's a great call out. You know, it's interesting going back to that study. I'll make sure we put a link or reference into it. It's also my LinkedIn page. So if you follow me on LinkedIn or connect, it's referenced there. But Tony, one of the outcomes was that Black students from PWIs were much less likely to have internships than Black students from HBCUs, for example. And I think it speaks to a number of interesting things that we should be doing more careful research around. You know, Braven, you made me think about it because they've really specialized in serving those types of institutions. There are unique and different ways that we need to tend to those students' needs, and clearly at a national level, there's a gap there, right? Another one of those gaps that we have to do more to solve. So in any event, you know, Kim, I would love it if you just kind of give the 60-second or so primer on the work that the Kaplan has done, really aimed around trying to expand access, you know, to your point around Stanley's original mission. You know, a lot of people, we're 85 years old, right? So, you know, startups tell their founding story. Kaplan's 85 years old. We sometimes forget to tell our founding story, but, you know, Stanley started tutoring primarily immigrants and Jewish students in Brooklyn in his parents' basement in 1938, right? And it was really driven by his own career door closing. He graduated #2 in his class from CUNY and applied to 5 or 6 medical schools, did not get accepted to any of them because of Jewish quotas at the time. So his dream of becoming a doctor was shattered in that process, and he turned to one of his natural talents, teaching and tutoring, and decided that he was going to try to open doors for everybody else. And that was, you know, the founding vision, mission, and purpose of Stanley. But the work with All Access, I think, is one of the biggest breakthroughs that I think Kim and I both have seen in the time we've been here. So just tell us what it is in basic terms, Kim, and then would love to hear why each of your institutions have embarked in this journey with us.
So to Brandon's point, you know, we have worked with colleges and universities for years, and from an institutional level, you know, I think, and, you know, Brittany and I have worked together for, I think, almost 10 years, right, Brittany? A lot of our partners could support smaller groups of students, right? So 10 students, 20 students, oh my gosh, maybe 50 students. We all know that that's not what's going to move the needle in terms of pipelines to medical schools, law schools, you know, supporting students with credentials. Those numbers aren't what's going to make the difference. And so for the last couple of years, you know, we've had partners, we've been in a lot of discussions with partners, like, what could we do differently? How could we do it? Luckily, I work for Brandon, who's very innovative and pushes the envelope a lot at Kaplan. And we came up with this idea of providing a license to an institution where all students at the institution would have access to some resource under the pillars of standardized test prep, professional licensing prep, workforce readiness, and credentialing. And so really it's the definition of, we kind of played around with what would be the best name. Well, All Access kind of encompasses it, because it really is, in terms of equity, we're eliminating the barriers to those types of resources that can, you know, so many students get to a point in, you know, on their path maybe to medical school where MCAT is just another expense, right? So it's additive, and it ultimately creates a barrier that doesn't let students continue to proceed. And so really this idea of providing a license to a university, again, all students have all access. And so we're up to about 13 partners across the country, and we have 3 of them here today. And so we're, like I had said previously, we're really seeing the needle move on the numbers of students. And again, we're a piece of the puzzle, but really how, how we can support the students in that way. So
yeah. Oh, go ahead, Kim. Yeah.
And so maybe Brittany, if you want to start and talk about how you've incorporated all access.
Yeah, and I think Kim talking through the background and relationship, that made me realize that Kaplan's older than Cleveland State University, fun fact. So Cleveland State is a very young institution, very robust, 59 years old, I think. Yeah, 59 years old this year. So Kaplan preceded even Cleveland State. But I think for me, I remember when Kim reached out to talk through the idea, and I am guessing it was probably around the same brainstorming stages that you all were having, and painting a picture of what this might look like at a school like Cleveland State. So thinking about our mission to really enhance social mobility for our students, and I used to be the director for pre-professional health programs before bringing that office along with me to join our old career services office and create career development. And so now we support all students tracking toward any goal, whether it's entering the workforce or graduate and professional programs. And I had started piecemeal. I started with Kaplan scholarships. I started with fundraising about 6 years ago toward reducing the financial barriers of application and interviewing. I started with experience barriers. So now we have research, volunteer, leadership, and job pipelines for every pre-professional health student that allows a student that has no network to come right in and hit the ground running with our network. And pre-COVID, we were sending 150 pre-health students out into the community per semester to engage in volunteering. So we were working on all of the barriers that pre-professional students face, and financial is one of the biggest. But the finances of applying to graduate professional health or law school are sometimes too much. And when all access was presented, that was an answer to not just reducing a barrier for some students, but eliminating a barrier for all students. And so when we navigated the first contract, and we were just wrapping up our first year right now, when we navigated that contract, initially we were playing around with numbers and should we set a bar for this number of students per test? And then we threw that out the window and said, no, it should be all students, period. It doesn't matter what tests they want to take. It doesn't matter what they want to do. All students means all students. And so that's what we did. And we signed the first deal, started enrolling students this past year. And we have just under 500 students that have taken advantage in year one. All of our nursing graduates have done NCLEX prep. The next most popular test is the MCAT, with about 23% of our students registering for either a self-paced or live MCAT course. And our students pick what works for them. So if they want to take a live course Monday, Wednesday evenings from 6 to 9, that's what they sign up for, just like any student who would be paying out of pocket on their own. And so this is equal to every single individual paying. They have the exact same access as anyone else does, and potentially more, because we are negotiating the amount of time a student has access to their materials as well. We have saved students just under $450,000 that they otherwise would have paid out of pocket this past year. And that eliminates a huge financial barrier. But then what we've been able to do with our fundraise dollars even goes beyond that. And so now a student that doesn't have the financial capability to get to medical school, we can provide financial resources every single step of the way. And so now, not only are they getting MCAT prep and individual pre-professional coaching from our career specialists, but they are also able to get their test paid for. So if they have the financial assistance program, great. If not, we're going to pay the 100% cost of their test if they need it. We also have an application fee assistance program in-house. So when a student needs help paying for applications, if they don't have fee assistance, and some of these applications have no fee assistance, then we will cover their costs for a certain number of schools for them to apply. Secondary fees, interview attire, sending a student to an in-person interview regardless of location. We can cover the entire experience, and test prep is one piece of that puzzle, but it impacts every single student that has a dream and can get there in terms of getting through the coursework and can get to that readiness to start preparing for an exam.
Thanks, Brittany. You guys have done a brilliant job in terms of how you've been thinking about rolling it out too. And so congratulations on all the great success just 1 year in. Tony, would love to hear, what made you guys do this?
It just goes back to our mission, most diverse, contemporary, unapologetic, which is with a note toward access. So we are pretty fresh in the business, but I am taking a note for somebody to get on my team to get in contact with Brittany post haste. That is an exceptional, comprehensive framework. I can tell you though that in the past, the barriers around these kinds of tests have been significant for us. And in Delaware, where we don't have a med school, as one example, we do have a program that has reciprocity with a local school in Pennsylvania, and still. The number one factor for what I believe are very talented students and actually taking the step is their ability to pay for the MCAT. The same is true for a number of legal pre-law students that we have as well. So we think, as I think I told you all a few days ago, that this is not just specific to Delaware State. I think it could be a game changer for a lot of HBCUs across the country. I know you're already working with Xavier, Howard, and some others, but I have made it a priority to begin to share the concept with the President's Board of Advisors on HBCUs here in September. So I'm excited about what it portends. Just to give you some background, you all may know this, but 80% of all Black judges started at an HBCU, 50% of all Black lawyers started at an HBCU, about 60% of all Black doctors started at an HBCU. And while the numbers are small, with this kind of program, we could significantly accelerate their import and impact in the communities they call home and in our broader citizenry. So we're very excited about it.
I love the unapologetic part, Tony. That's a good new line. I got to figure out where to incorporate that somewhere in the talk track. But sorry, Kim, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say it was not surprising to me, to our team, that the HBCUs, how enthusiastically they have embraced all access. Just in terms of student need, but also just driving towards success, driving towards the next path. And so it's just, it's been really great to see the various partners who've come on that are HBCUs.
Hey, Kim, I can tell you too, interestingly enough, we have a fair amount of dreamers on our campus working with the dream.us. And as you know, there are significant barriers artificial barriers that are in their way of ongoing success. So many of them have taken to professional opportunities where they can actually hang up their own shingle in the long term. So this becomes a unique opportunity for them, as well as the government sort of figures out that these Americans are in fact Americans and should have equal access on all scores.
That's amazing.
Mentioned dream.us. A lot of people don't know that was founded and really spearheaded by Don Graham, who is the chairman of Graham Holdings, Kaplan's parent company, the former Washington Post. And when the paper was sold to Jeff Bezos, it was renamed Graham Holdings. And Don has been one of the most steadfast supporters of DACA students, and particularly in the form of dream.us. So we're proud to at least be related to the Graham Holdings family in that process. But very good point, Tony. Eric, you guys have been working on a lot of stuff for a while relative to this before All Access was introduced. I know you guys have been working on free test prep resources for students. Just give us an idea why this shift and what you guys have seen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll start with the statistics. So last year was our first year. We had 150 spots, LSATs, MCATs, GREs. We gave all 150 away. I think it ended up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of those students were first generation, about 79% of them were Pell eligible. Pretty evenly split between all three of those exams, probably leaned a little bit more towards GREs and LSATs. And the total savings there's just shy of $212,000. So we've ballooned this year to 350 spots. I think we'll have no problem using them. We're a month in, we've already used about 10% of them. So the word's out on our campus. We're making a lot of good friends with students who have postgraduate interests. We're making a lot of good friends with our colleagues in other colleges and schools and other academic student support units and other co-curricular units. So we're really trying to build, I mean, it's been a way to build relationships across campus and I think that's going to lead to even further growth, which leads obviously to more savings to students. We started it, so we have a McNair program at UT Austin. McNair, as you probably know, is one of those federally funded TRIO programs in the Department of Education. There are a lot of regulatory boundaries around who's eligible for McNair, including citizenship. And we really knew that there were more students that we could serve with postgraduate preparation than we could bring into McNair. So we started about a year ago a program we called Strive Grad Prep Academy, or Strive GPA. And one piece of that, an important piece of that, is the partnership with Kaplan to be able to offer no-cost test prep to students, again, with a priority on first generation Pell eligibility. Honestly, though, it's the Kaplan course is kind of a loss leader, right? There's a whole ecosystem of preparing students to apply, get accepted, transition, be successful, persist through graduation and graduate programs or professional degrees. But in the process, the exams take on an outsized importance for most students. They over contextualize the value of the score in the whole, right, holistic application process. So we want to bring them into the center and take the cost off their plate, because that is a barrier for sure. The cost of the test prep, it can be overly high for some students. We do also offer, we have a pool of funding to offer exam fee support to students who need it. But then once they're in the program, then we can say, okay, we're going to take this piece away from you, plus we're going to explain to you how it fits into a larger holistic application process, and we can provide other sorts of graduate literacy, right? The importance of the statement of purpose, how to craft a personal statement, how do you build a relationship with faculty so that, one, you can get good letters of recommendation, and two, you can start doing the kind of networking that, right, successful people are good at doing. Right, even everything as granular as having a resume or a CV, or the difference between those two kind of things. So part of what we wanted to do with the Kaplan is reduce cost, reduce barriers, but also to get students into the door so that we could start getting them a larger kind of set of information through the Strive GPA program about how do you prepare kind of for this difficult thing that you're going to do, right? And understand the value of the test prep in that process, and understand the value of the exams in those processes, and not give them more weight than they need, right? But to treat them seriously and to be as prepared as possible so you maximize your competitiveness.
Great stuff. I'm looking at the clock. We've got about 11 minutes left, and I know there's been a couple questions in the Q&A. I'd encourage folks to pop a few more in there. I know we tried to answer a couple of the ones quickly live. I'm going to do a quick round because I know this group is prepared for it. I'm going to jump to the last question we had prepared, and I think we'll still have some room for a quick Q&A. But crystal ball time, gang. 5 years from now, between now and 5 years, what do you think is our biggest opportunity for student success? Who wants to start? Anybody? Unapologetically, Tony?
That's an interesting question. And my team and I talk a lot about what we learned through COVID. And one of those things is meeting our students where they are in much more and more robust modes of educational opportunity. So we are trying to think about how to be a more nimble university as a result. And when I think about that, I often think not about the traditional undergraduate student, but what we call the near completers. Those folks who show up at homecoming every year, but are now in their 30s and 40s and never finished school because of some undue financial burden. I think there's a unique opportunity for us to bring them back in the fold, make sure that we've lined them up appropriately to complete their degree, make sure they have opportunities for additional certifications, and see how many of them want to pursue advanced degrees and professional licensure. So I don't know if it's the most unique opportunity, but I think it's a big one for us. And the other thing I'd say quickly, and it's a story, so I'll try to move quickly. A young man came to my office, and when I was provost, and wanted to speak with me right away, was scared, nervous. And at the end of our conversation, he finally told me why he was there. He said, "I'm homeless." And I said, "How long have you been homeless?" He said, "Since I was a sophomore in high school." I said, "What's your year at Delaware State University?" He said he was a sophomore at Delaware State. Just for a minute, think what it takes for a sophomore in high school to even think about college, then apply to college, get admitted to college, and never tell anybody about his plight for another 2 years. That young man worked for me from that moment on and is now a teacher in the Baltimore City public school. Those are the unique opportunities for access for all, and we are committed to and proud to be partners with colleagues like Brittany and Eric, and certainly with the Kaplan team.
Meeting students where they are. It is a powerful, important reminder, and you're right. Pandemic helped us. Obviously, there were a lot of bad outcomes from the pandemic, but I think it helped open our eyes to a lot of those things in ways where we're stepping up. So, Brittany, what would be your answer?
3 quick hits. 1, moving experiential education into a not just a 20% outcome, but finding ways to connect faculty and curriculum to move it to become a requirement. And I think partnership across any aisles where possible, employer and industry partnerships on majors and hiring. I think that integrated degrees, so pairing a degree like computer science and graphic design, because we know that there's 3D modeling jobs and there are animation jobs and there are marketing jobs, that someone who has a design background paired with a computer science background, they'll immediately get hired. And then the last one is micro-credentials. So stackable credentials that enhance someone's degree experience. I know that that's something that we'll be rolling out alongside Kaplan, but that's also something that CSU is trying to wrap its arms around in our all access licensure, but also in continuing education, in the College of Business, and really finding a way to enhance the competitiveness of micro-credentials, which also includes partnering with business to make sure that the micro-credentials are going to be valuable, and finding ways for students to pay for them or to pay to train for them. So it really is about how are we navigating higher education to be more competitive. Here's what we know. An associate's degree might not get someone out of poverty after they complete the degree. It might, but it might and probably won't. A bachelor's degree has a better capacity for getting someone out of poverty for their generation and their lifetime. A professional degree will absolutely get someone out of poverty for them and for generations to come. And so we have to navigate where we are and show that we are moving the needle on poverty, we're moving the needle on equity, we are moving the needle on competitiveness in terms of experience, and we have to, as higher education, band together to prove that worthiness.
That's a heck of a summary. I know Eric's gonna have a tough time beating it, but
he doesn't need to. I'm his partner in this too.
Absolutely, yeah. I could probably just say ditto and stop right there. I mean, I think definitely I think universities need to get better and are getting better at being promiscuous and ecumenical partners, partnering with everybody. So cross-campus, intra-campus partnerships, but also between campuses, and then between public and private institutions, and between local governments and state governments and federal governments. And so just partnerships all over the place, right? They've always been there, but I think we're seeing more innovative versions of those. And I think the Kaplan All Access is probably an example of that. And my colleagues here at Delaware State and Cleveland State are examples of that as well. So that's one. I mean, in 5 years, I think the next 50 years, the ripple effects of the pandemic, right? There's a reason that my grandparents who grew up during the Depression still kept money in a coffee can on their shelves 50 years after the Depression. So I don't think we'll really know the full impact of COVID for a generation even longer, right? There will be behaviors that current students are starting to exhibit that will stick around, right? So what those impacts are and the challenges and opportunities that come along with them, I think that that's a conversation that's going to be ongoing. One that seems to be positive is that students strike me, and this is anecdotal, right? My experience, so I'm editorializing a little bit, but my experience is that students are doing a better job of living whole person lives, right? That they're working too hard. They overestimate the consequences of making mistakes. They do a lot of things that are way too hard on themselves, and we need to try to ameliorate that as best we can with our programming and our support and our guidance. But the fact that they're even asking questions about, is this going to harm me mentally? How do I put this thing into a larger kind of whole person landscape, right? So that I'm not subsuming my life to work. I think that these are good questions, and I wondered if the pandemic had some impact on that. And I hope that we follow their lead and take some of that on and build it into our curricula as we start building these programs. But the experiential learning piece is really important, expanding that, contextualizing that, having it wed with the academic missions of universities, which are still good missions, right? We shouldn't forego the fact that the generation of knowledge is, right, one of the primary things that higher education has always been good at doing, for all its faults, right? And then add to that experiential learning that augments it, expands it. I think that's really important as well. And then, of course, keep quickening and deepening the conversation around equity and access. And I'm glad that we're talking about this more than we have in the past, or that we're talking about it in different ways than we have in the past. And I hope we continue to talk about it. So I think those are some of the opportunities and challenges that are going to face us in the coming years.
Yeah, well said by all of you. I think, one of the things I've reflected a lot on, which is kind of embedded in a lot of your points, is that I feel like we've lost track of the learning value of work. And I think if we can kind of look at it in that way, it brings it into academic focus. It brings it into purposeful, kind of frameworks for faculty. Faculty are very bright people. We all know that, right? And you think of how many faculty have had work experiences outside of academia, right? For many of them, they have not. But, when you start to think about the learning value of work, how can we create learning from work experiences, even if that might be frontline jobs? There's still a lot that somebody could learn in that role if we help curate it. And so I'm very hopeful, despite some of the rather depressing trends in statistics. I'm hopeful because of leaders like you, and I'm very much looking forward to a bright future for higher ed. First of all, Kim, thank you. Brittany, thank you. Tony, thank you. Eric, thank you very much. And thanks to the Chronicle of Higher Ed for helping host us today. We appreciate all of you joining us and hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.